Margaret Harrison had lived 73 years with grace and dignity. Her silver hair framed a face that still held traces of the beauty she'd been in her youth. She sat in her favorite armchair by the window, the afternoon sun warming her shoulders, when the phone call came. "Darling, your MOM changed the password." Her daughter-in-law Claire's voice crackled through the speaker. "I can't shop with her card anymore." Margaret's heart sank. She'd given Claire access to her credit card 5 years ago, after her son David married her. It was meant for emergencies, for groceries when times were tight, for the grandchildren's needs. "I'll look into it, dear," Margaret said softly, her voice steady despite the confusion swirling in her mind. 20 minutes later, David burst through her front door. His face was flushed red, his eyes blazing with an anger she hadn't seen since he was a teenager. "MOM, what's this about the credit card?" he demanded, not even pausing to kiss her cheek as he usually did. Margaret looked at her only son, the boy she'd raised alone after his father passed, the man she'd sacrificed everything for. "I didn't change anything, sweetheart," she said quietly. "Perhaps the bank did something. Don't lie to me." David's voice rose. "Claire says you've been controlling and manipulative. She says you probably did this to spite her." The words hit Margaret like physical blows. She'd never been anything but kind to Claire. She'd welcomed her with open arms, babysat the grandchildren every week, cooked Sunday dinners for the whole family. "David, please sit down. Let me call the bank, save it, MOM. We'll figure this out ourselves. Maybe it's time you stop trying to run our lives." He left. The door slammed behind him, and Margaret sat in the sudden silence, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. But neither of them knew the real shock was still coming. Margaret didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Claire, every moment with David. Where had she gone wrong? The next morning, she made herself coffee with shaking hands and called the bank. "Mrs. Harrison," the pleasant customer service representative said, "I'm showing that your credit card was reported stolen 3 days ago." "A new one was issued and mailed to your address." "Stolen?" Margaret's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "I never reported it stolen. Let me check." "Yes, the call came from a Claire Harrison. She identified herself as your daughter and had all your security information." The room seemed to tilt. Margaret gripped the edge of the kitchen table. "Can you tell me how much has been charged in the past few months?" The silence on the other end was long. "Too long, Mrs. Harrison. In the past 6 months alone, there have been charges totaling $47,000. The phone slipped from Margaret's fingers. Margaret had been a teacher for 40 years. She'd saved every penny, lived modestly, all so she could help her son and leave something for her grandchildren. $47,000 gone. She sat at her kitchen table, documents spread before her, bank statements she'd requested, credit card bills she'd been too trusting to check carefully. Claire's signature was on file, authorized by Margaret herself years ago. Designer handbags, expensive restaurants, a trip to Hawaii Margaret had never been told about, spa treatments, jewelry. The list went on and on. Margaret's hands trembled as she traced the numbers with her finger. This wasn't emergency money. This wasn't groceries for the grandchildren. This was betrayal. But what hurt more than the money was David's anger, his willingness to believe Claire's lies, the way he'd looked at his own mother with such contempt. Margaret closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She'd always taught her students that kindness was strength, that forgiveness was noble. But she'd also taught them that truth mattered, that justice wasn't revenge, it was balance. She picked up the phone and made a call she never thought she'd make. 2 weeks passed. Margaret didn't call David, though every fibre of her being wanted to. She missed her grandchildren terribly. 8-year-old Sophie and 6-year-old Tommy, who called her Nana, and lit up when she walked into a room. She spent those weeks gathering evidence, consulting with a lawyer, and making difficult decisions. At night, she looked at photo albums, remembering David as a little boy, the way he'd held her hand, the way he'd said, "I love you, Marby," every night before bed. Where had that boy gone? On a Thursday afternoon, there was a knock at her door. Margaret opened it to find David standing there, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. "MOM," he whispered. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside silently. David walked to the living room and sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Margaret waited, her heart pounding. "I found receipts," he said finally, his voice breaking. "Hidden in Claire's car, for things we don't have, places I've never been. And then I checked our joint account, and..." He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. "MOM," She's been lying to me about everything. The money, the credit card, what you supposedly said to her. All of it. Margaret sat down slowly in her chair, saying nothing. She told me you called her useless, that you said I married beneath me, that you were trying to cut her out of the family. David's voice cracked. I believed her, Mom. I believed her over you, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The silence stretched between them, heavy with pain and regret. David, Margaret said softly, do you remember what I used to tell you when you were little? That love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice we make every day. He nodded, unable to speak. You chose her. That's what marriage means. But son, love also requires truth, and respect, and trust. She paused, her voice gentle but firm. She stole from me $47,000. She lied to you about me. She tried to destroy the relationship between a mother and her son. David's face crumpled. I know. I confronted her this morning. She said she deserved it. That you had more than enough money and she needed nice things too. That I didn't make enough to give her the life she wanted. He looked at his mother with anguish. What do I do? Margaret leaned forward, taking her son's hands in hers. That's not for me to decide, sweetheart. But I can tell you this. Kindness doesn't mean letting people hurt you. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting betrayal. And love, real love, is built on honesty. The next few months were difficult. Claire moved out, staying with her sister while she and David went to counseling. Margaret filed a police report, though she ultimately decided not to press charges, not for Claire's sake, but for her grandchildren's. The money was gone, most of it unrecoverable. But Margaret had learned something valuable, that she'd raised a son who, when faced with truth, chose to do what was right. Who apologized, who tried to make amends. David came to visit every Sunday now, bringing Sophie and Tommy. He'd taken a second job to start paying his mother back, though she told him repeatedly it wasn't necessary. It is necessary, Mom, he'd said quietly. Not because of the money, because of what it represents. Because I need to show you that your son is still in here. The one you raised with love and integrity. One Sunday evening, as they sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard, David turned to his mother. You could have destroyed me, you know. Pressed charges. Turned me and the kids against Claire completely. Made this whole thing public and humiliating. Margaret smiled. That same warm smile she'd given him thousands of times throughout his life. Revenge isn't strength, David. It's weakness dressed up as power. I didn't need revenge. I needed my son back. I needed the truth to come to light. And I needed you to understand that love, the real kind, survives honesty. It requires it. David wiped his eyes. Claire and I are getting divorced. She won't fight for custody. She's already seeing someone else. Someone with more money. Margaret's heart ached for him. But she also felt relief. Her son was free. Then you and the children will be okay, she said firmly. Better than okay. You'll be honest with each other. You'll build something real. As the sun set over the yard, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sophie ran up to the porch. Nana, Daddy says we can live closer to you. Is that true? Margaret looked at David, who nodded. Yes, sweetheart, Margaret said, pulling her granddaughter close. That's true. Sophie squealed with delight and ran back to tell Tommy. David stood, pulling his mother into a tight embrace. Thank you, he whispered, for everything, for raising me right, for not giving up on me, for showing me what real love looks like. Margaret held her son, this man who'd broken her heart, and then worked so hard to mend it. She thought about betrayal and forgiveness, about anger and grace, about the complicated beauty of human relationships. We all stumble, David, she said softly. What matters is whether we get back up, whether we learn, whether we choose love over pride, truth over comfort, integrity over convenience. As they stood there together, watching the children play in the fading light, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. The password had changed, yes, but it had changed everything in ways none of them expected. It had revealed the truth. It had tested their bonds. And ultimately, it had brought them back to what mattered most. Not money, not pride, not even the absence of pain, but love. Real, honest, hard-won love. The kind that survives betrayal and emerges stronger. The kind that Margaret had always tried to teach, and that David was finally learning to practice. The kind that would carry them forward, together.